Hello everybody, I am Ben from Team Panic, and today we're going to be looking at how my antweight, this is a party, performed at ARC's November meet. So this is a party after the fact, obviously, and yeah, there wasn't too many changes to this after the build video, and actually the fact there wasn't too many changes to this at all. It was just a new chassis and actually a slight change to where the weapon was mounted so that everything was spinning so that the actual nut stays on and tightens up as the weapon spins. But that was basically the only change. There wasn't really a whole lot I had to do to this. It was just a chassis print and rebuild. So before we get into the fights, I will say there's going to be a few fights today. So if you just want to skip to the fights and ignore what I'm talking about, you can do that with the time codes in the description down below. Having said that, the first fight of the day is up against Escobar, who started out as a shrapnel clone. It's a horizontal spinner, and it's usually pretty nasty, actually. So I was a little bit worried going into this fight, but we'll see how this one goes. So what happened there? Well, what happened there was that when I first did the build of This Is a Party, I didn't have my nylock nuts around, so I just threaded a regular nut onto the end of the brushless motor, and that was holding for a little while. Halfway through that fight, although obviously the nut came off, which was not good, and then for a little while the weapon stayed on the brushless motor and still spun and still hit things, but only for a little while. Then it actually fell off and left me open to attack. He kind of had me a little bit like fooled there for a little while because he did turn his weapon off and was kind of pushing around a little bit, but obviously his weapon was working the whole time and he was just conserving battery or conserving the weapon or something. I don't know what, but yeah, he would kind of left that off for a little bit during the fight, which is good because I didn't take too much damage out of that fight. Most of the stuff that is on here right now is from further fights, and we'll get to those in just a minute. Yeah, so then what ended up happening is, of course, I got him in the pit, which wasn't too bad. That was, yeah, it was better than I was expecting anyway. Alright, so up next we have a blade tip. So blade tip is a very good wedge bot driven by Owen, and it's a pretty robust robot, this one, and all of its wedges and everything are made out of titanium, so I basically knew there was no way that the weapon was going to get through them. All I could hope for was that the weapon was going to catch one of those and flick him over. So there you go, a win over Blade Tip, which, it's a good thing. It's kind of proving to me that I'm starting to learn how to drive verts a little bit better. Owen is a really good driver and who drives wedges quite a lot. So beating him is usually a good indication of how well you're driving. I'm starting to drive pretty well with this. However, this fight was a little bit worrying for me because the little roll hoop that I have sitting at the back here wasn't actually working as I intended it to. You could see some of the times when I was upside down, I was hitting the weapon on the ground. Now this is a really, really bad thing. Hitting the weapon on the ground is where a lot of the damage comes from in this robot because the weapon mount is just a printed piece, especially in this version it's just a printed piece. And so this weapon hitting the ground, which is immovable, is really, really bad and puts a lot of stress and strain on the weapon motor. So I was a little bit worried about that. But with everything that was going on with Annie, my beetle weight, I didn't really have time to even look at that, so I just moved on and went straight into the next fight. Now the next fight was up against Dr. Claus. Now Dr. Claus hasn't been around for a little while, but every time he is around he does really well. Robot with two very big claws out the front, and it's very, very good at grabbing hold of the sides of a robot and lifting it up off the ground and just driving it wherever it wants to, which in most cases is down the pit. So really my only hope in this fight is to come in strong, hit him with the weapon, and take those arms off before the pits open. So I have like about a minute to try and destroy his arms before the pit opens. So let's see how I did with that. So that really wasn't good, and I think in hindsight I know what happened. The hits on the ground in the blade tip fight weakened the motor mount, and then in this fight against Dr. Claus, that weakened motor mount was causing the blade to wander around a bit, and it actually hit one of the pontoons on the other side over here, and there's actually some nice damage from that, where my weapon was actually hitting my own chassis, which is not good. And it also meant, of course, that I didn't get the chance to really spin the weapon up well and hit his arms. And he also did run away from me a little bit, which didn't help the situation either. So all of that meant that by the time the pits were open, he still had arms and claws, and he could get in there and grab hold of me and throw me down the pit in the usual Dr. Claus style. So having just lost to Dr. Claus, I was put up against Antimatter. Now, if you remember the fight video from last month, Antimatter was the one fight that I actually lost last month, and I was, kind of concerned that that was going to be another fight the same way, because he has a very, very low printed wedge and he usually gets in underneath me. Last time I fought him, I was not playing to my strengths very well. I was trying to charge him head on, and I was just getting pushed up his wedge and wasn't really doing anything. So that was not very good. Let's take a look at this fight. So there we go. This is the first time for this event that the weapon mount actually breaks, which means that the weapon is now flopping around all over the place loose, and I can't hit him with the weapon, which was really worrying for me because, as I said, he out-wedges me very, very easily, and you saw that in this fight. He out-wedges me all the time, but it was actually kind of a blessing in disguise because it meant that I was playing more like a wedge, and what ended up happening was he had added just a tiny little lip at the top, which is where my little prongs got caught, and I found that I had a bit of pushing power when we were like that. He actually talked to me after the event and said that when I was pushing in underneath, I was tipping his robot back a little bit and just kind of hitting it on a spot where half of his wheels were touching, and then he had a piece of plastic in underneath that was also touching the ground at the same time. So that's what gave me the pushing power there to get him down the pit. So I was actually kind of lucky, but also kind of unlucky because, of course, that meant that now the weapon mount was busted and we had to do a very, very quick fix to get that back into the arena. However, sitting here with the 3 wins and 1 loss, I'm looking in good stead to make the finals. Dr. Claus is definitely going to go straight into the finals because Dr. Claus at this point has won all of their round robin fights. My round robin fights, I've got 1 more fight left to go, and I need to win that fight to make it through into the finals. So this one is up against kinda sorta. Like I said, we re-glued the weapon mount just with some super glue and bicarb soda to try and get everything nice and homogenized, and then we go straight back into the arena. So that was good and really bad all at the same time. So good was that the weapon spun and worked and was actually kind of okay for that fight. Bad was the fact that the weapon broke again. I mean, I got some really good hits in before the weapon broke. There was that one really nice shot that flipped him up and out of the camera angle that you guys saw. I really wish I'd actually had a nice top-down shot of the box there because he kind of hit like halfway up the Lexan or something. It was a really, really big hit, and I was quite happy with that one. It was also a credit to him that he survived that hit because it was quite a massive hit. But as you did see, I then also broke the weapon mount, which meant that I had to do another quick fix before going straight into the finals. Now, I will say that my next fight was in the finals up against Rino, and Rino's driver is actually the one that's been helping me repair the weapon mount every time it's broken. So once again, he helped me repair the weapon mount after the kind of sort of fight, and then I had to go stick it straight in up against him, which is often the way it goes in combat robots. You'll help somebody out only to face them in the very next round, but we don't really mind too much about that stuff around here. We actually prefer it that way because having a fight is way, way better than not having a fight. 10 times out of 10. Like, it's so much better to actually have that fight than it is for somebody to pull out because of technical issues. That's never any fun. You're there to fight robots, so you want to fight robots. Having said that, let's take a look at the semi-final fight. So, once again, good and bad. This time round, we bent his flipper up, like the titanium at the bottom of his flipper. We bent that all the way up and out of the way pretty early in that fight, which was good because it kind of disabled his flipper. But I mean, he could still use it to self-right and things, which is how he got around a lot of the time. And then, of course, we broke the weapon mount again. So something is going on here, and I honestly think it's this this standoff, the upside down standoff. I think it's in the wrong place, and the weapon was hitting the ground, and that is why we've had so many issues in this this month's fights. The weapon mount itself is exactly the same as the one that was in last month's robot, and it did not break anywhere near as much as this. So I honestly think, like I said, it's because of hitting the ground with the weapon and putting all of that shock load straight into the weapon mount. I think that's what's going on here. For the next version, we're going to do something slightly different. We'll actually use a Lexan version of this, so it's going to be a lot stronger than this one, and also probably have a better upside down bar so that the weapon doesn't touch the ground. And we can't do this because this is another big issue that we're facing. So we'll probably end up with 2 of these, I think, so that it can drive upside down nice and easily, and I don't ever have to worry about hitting the weapon on the ground because that's a huge, huge pain. So that was kind of a mini rant about how all of this stuff is going. And now, so we've just lost the semi-final fight, and that means that we're going into the 3rd place playoff, and the weapon mount has completely broken through this time, which is not good. So I was running out of time. I had to do this repair really, really quickly. I just used super glue and then a bunch of hot glue around the outside, and that hot glue is still here for the most part. So it's time now to head into that 3rd place fight, and this one is with Mr. Blade Jangles, which is Jaden of Raptor Robotics, who you've seen on the channel a little bit before. That is his robot, and we were actually in the finals together last month, but in the finals for 1st and 2nd place rather than the 3rd place playoff. So let's take a look at that. So, unlike last month, he kind of got just really got the better of me in this fight. Once again, the weapon mount has broken. This one is not all that surprising because it was literally just being held in place with hot glue and a little bit of super glue. The super glue had not had a chance to kick by the time I went into that fight, so it was really just being held together with hot glue. It's amazing, realistically, that I got as many hits out of the hot glue mount as I absolutely did. Yeah, and then as you could see there, once the weapon was broken and I was upside down and things, it was never going to go my way. So I ended up losing that. It means I've come fourth for this competition, and it's all down to this bloody weapon motor mount. Like I said, we're going to go through and we're going to use some Lexan for the next one because Lexan will not break in these stupid ways. And also I have like a gram left, I think, or 2 grams left in this robot. So we're going to add an extra one of these upside down poles. And so it will sit either this way or it will sit on another pole here, and it will never have the weapon touch the ground because that is really messing me up in this fight or in these sets of fights. So yeah, there we go. We've got a lot of stuff to do, or a few little bits and pieces to do, but this is a party should be back again into next month's meet, in December's meet, and it should actually just work next time. Fingers crossed, hopefully. Anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed that one, and I will see you in the next video.